Hi students, let us discuss the second topic of Unit 1 of Chapter 2, definitions. We have four definitions to cover and four are interrelated. Those four definitions are, the first one is offer or proposal, the second one is acceptance or promise, then we move to agreement, thereafter the definition of contract. So in simple terms, let us understand A has given offer to B that he is willing to sell his car to B. That is an offer. And B will give his acceptance that he is going to buy the car. So once the offer which was given by A gets accepted, that becomes a promise. Once this promise, at what price the B will pay to A? Let us say he buys for 4 lakhs. So once the consideration is attached to this promise, it becomes an agreement. Once this promise plus consideration, which is an agreement, if it is enforceable, if it is valid in court of law, then it becomes a contract. Hope this example is clear. So we start with discussing offer, then move to acceptance or promise, then moves to agreement, then finally we'll discuss about contract. So this is important for 2 marks. Let's discuss offer or proposal. So this offer or proposal is discussed in Section 2, Clause A of the Indian Contract Act. So what does this offer or proposal says? So the first pointer for this proposal, for this definition is when one person signifies to another. So there are two parties. Remember, there are two parties. So one person is talking to another, one person is telling to another, one person is signifies to another. What is he signifying? He is signifying his willingness either to do or to abstain from doing anything. So he wanted to do something, okay, for the other party, or he don't want to do something for other party. So both positive as well as negative, doing, not doing or abstain from doing. Okay. So let us understand with an example. So when one person signifies to another, in the previous example we discussed, where A wants to sell car to B. So here A is going to deliver the car to B. So he is doing an activity. So this is comes under to do. What is an example for abstain from doing? So think this way, there were certain agreements, okay, in the commercial world where one party will pay the money if you don't establish the shop near him. Let us say one person is selling ice creams. Now there is one more guy who want to come and compete with that guy. So this guy is ready to pay money if the other person does not establish his organization, his branch near his shop. So at times in commercial world, you will get paid for not doing things. Hope it is clear. So at times in commercial world, what happens? You may get paid for not doing certain things. Let us say you are in construction business. There is one more competitor wants to enter into the same city or same village or same town. So you are ready to pay some money so that that person will not establish his business in near your office, near your okay construction facilities. Hope it is clear. So we need to we discuss 2 points. What are those? One, when one person signifies to another, there are two people. One is talking to another, one is telling to another, one is signifying to another. What is signifying? His willingness. His willingness either to do or not to do, either to do or abstain from doing anything, with a view to obtain assent of the other party, with a view to obtain acceptance of the other party for such act or for such abstinence. So this willingness, that person is telling that he will deliver the car to you. Okay. So deliver the car to you, but he is expecting an acceptance. He is expecting to listen whether you are going to buy or not going to buy. So that means he wants your acceptance. He's waiting for your acceptance. That is what we call with a view to obtain assent of other party. With a view to obtain assent of the other party for such act or abstinence. Then we tell that he said to make proposal. He said to make proposal. Let us discuss one more time along with the characters. So here, one person is telling to another person. What is he telling? What is he signifying? That this person is willing either to do or not to do or abstain from doing anything. So this person is telling to this person that he is willing to sell goods. He is willing to provide services. He is willing to deliver car. He is willing to pay 1 lakh rupees along with interest after 6 months. So these are all the examples that he is willing to do or not to do, okay, anything with a view to obtain assent of this party, with a view to obtain acceptance of this party. Then we call this as proposal. When we call this as proposal. Let us discuss the next definition, which is promise. Where it is dealt in Section 2, Clause B of Indian Contract Act 1872. What does it say? It says, the person to whom proposal is made. In the previous example, it is Mr. B to whom offer is made, to whom the proposal is made. So what Mr. B has done? Mr. B has provided his assent thereto. He has provided his acceptance. So once B provides his acceptance, who is B? B is the person to whom offer is made. So what he has done, he provided his acceptance to A. He has provided his assent to A. Once he provides his acceptance, we call the proposal is said to be accepted. Once this is accepted, the accepted proposal is called as promise. Very easy definition. First, we should understand the person to whom proposal is made. In the previous example, it was made to Mr. B. So what B has done? B has provided his acceptance or assent. Once he provided his acceptance, the proposal is said to be accepted. The accepted proposal, we call it as promise. So how mathematically you remember this promise? Promise is equal to offer plus acceptance. Let us move. So here, Mr. B has provided his acceptance, Once he's provided acceptance, it became a promise. Let us talk about two more definitions. Agreement, discussed in Section 2, Clause E, contract, Section 2, Clause H. What is an agreement? Every promise or set of promises. So we know the definition of promise. So once we know definition of promise, we can discuss the definition of agreement. Here, every promise or set of promises. There can be single promise, there can be multiple promises, and there should be consideration. There should be consideration for each other, Let us continue the same example. A is giving car to B. B is paying money to A. So here, for A, he is getting money. For B, he is getting car. So consideration to each other. Consideration means something in return. Consideration does not necessarily mean money. It means something in return. It can be in kind or it can be in money terms. So consideration means in something in return. Okay. So we know the definition of promise. So it can be single promise or it can be multiple promises. Along with promises, what you should have consideration for both the parties. Then we call it as agreement. So mathematically, how you will remember? Agreement is equal to promise plus consideration. So you have promise and you have consideration, that becomes an agreement. So once you know the definition of agreement, we can move to contract. Definition of contract. An agreement which is enforceable by law. We call it as contract. So you have an agreement which is enforceable by law, which is valid in court of law, we call it as contract. Sir, what are all the agreements which are not valid in court of law? Let us say social agreement. This is a legal agreement. Let us say social agreement. Father has promised son that he will pay 1 lakh, okay, or he'll buy bicycle if he goes to college for entire year. Okay, this is a social promise. Okay, there is a consideration provided in both the terms, so it becomes an agreement. But is it valid in court of law? It is not valid in court of law. Hence, it is a social agreement. It is not a legal agreement. So an agreement which is enforceable by law, we call it as contract. So you have an agreement, but it is not valid in court of law. It never becomes a contract. For example, social agreements. Social agreements will never become contracts. So four definition, we are clear with all the four definitions. Quickly revise all the four definitions. So what is proposal or offer? So when one person signifies to another, tells to another, talks to another about his willingness either to do or abstain from doing anything with a view to obtain assent of other party for such act or abstinence, he is said to make proposal. Thereafter, once we know the definition of offer, we can move to know the definition of promise. The person to whom offer is made, Mr. B, he's provide his acceptance. Once he provide acceptance, we call it the proposal is accepted, and the accepted proposal is called as promise. How you'll remember? Then you have agreement, and then you have contract. Hope all the four definitions are clear. Once we are clear with all these four definitions, we'll quickly see the differences between the agreement and contract. The agreement and contract. So how do we see the differences between contract and agreement? First, we'll give the definitions of contract and agreement. So the definition of contracts goes, just now we have discussed an agreement which is enforceable by law. So let us say comparison. So all contracts are agreements. So to become a contract, every contract should have an agreement plus enforceability. There cannot be a contract without an agreement. So all contracts are agreements. Enforceability. All contracts are enforceable in the court of law. So enforceability. So when we remember, when we recall the definition of contract is equal to agreement plus enforceability. So all contracts are agreements. All contracts are enforceable in the court of law. The scope is narrow because all the agreements are not contracts, right? So all the agreements are not contracts. There are multiple agreements. Okay, which is not valid in the court of law. So there are only few contracts, but there are multiple agreements available. So let us see the agreement. Definition of agreement: every promise or set of promises forming consideration to each other. Comparison. So all agreements may not be contracts. Example, we have seen social agreement. Social agreement cannot be a contract. So there are multiple agreements which are not enforceable in the court of law. Then we call it as, it stays as agreements. It will not go beyond agreement. It will not become contracts. So all agreements may not be contracts. We are not telling all agreements are not contracts. Please listen to this. All agreements may not be contracts. Mean there are certain agreements which become contracts. There are certain agreements which will not become contracts. Hope it is clear. Then enforceability. Again, we are telling all agreements may not be enforceable in the court of law. The same example, social agreement, is also relevant here. And the scope is wider scope. There are multiple agreements which are outside the contract also. So the scope of agreement is wider in nature. So 4 points you can easily remember. First, you write the definitions of both contract and agreement. Then you recall contracts as agreement and enforceability. So all contracts are agreements. All contracts are enforceable in the court of law. So if you remember the mathematical definition, it is easy to remember the next 2 points. Then finally, it has narrow scope. In case of agreement, once you write the 4 parts of contract, then you can easily write 4 parts of agreement as well. This is also important question for 2 marks. So with this, we are done with definitions along with differences. So once we are done with this, we are also done with this subtopic number 2, which is definitions. I want to recall these 5 subtopics once again. The 5 subtopics are history, definitions, contract, offer, acceptance. So out of 5 subtopics, we are done with 2 subtopics. In the next video, we will cover the third subtopic, which is contract. Thank you.